This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Karina Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different cues.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Karina Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate Ben Midgley.
So I'm sure you saw the numbers of the education rankings for the state of Maine. What are your concerns with that?
Well, there's a lot of concerns with that. First, let me say, though, that teachers work very hard in the state. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, and I do think teachers are underpaid. I think there's some teachers that are going over the top in terms of what they're trying to teach kids, in terms of what to think rather than how to think, but I don't want that to come across in any way as my view on teachers in general. I have incredible respect for teachers. The state, though, costs have gone up, 71%, and our test scores have gone down dramatically. It's a very convoluted system in Maine. There's a lot of different players involved. One, you've got the Commissioner of Education, which obviously you have to make that change pretty rapidly. State Board of Education, Maine School Management Association, Maine School Board Association, Maine School Principals Association, teachers unions, and then local school boards. So you have all these different groups contributing to what's going on in the state. So when you come in, it's not, and I've spent a significant amount of time on this with some of the smartest folks in the state on this topic. It's not the easiest thing to change rapidly. And if you look at the history of education in Maine, it's gone, this way and that way and this way and that way. And some things have succeeded, some things have failed. But when you make major changes too rapidly, you're taking this really large institution and you're asking them to change everything they're doing, learn something maybe with not enough training or proper testing and go in another direction. I think that's been one of the problems in the state over the years. Right now, the big issue is the focus on social emotional learning rather than focusing on test scores. Now, teachers have to be counselors and they have to have circle time and do all these different things, not in every school system. You've got a lot of ideology in the schools. You got 57 school districts that will not tell a parent if their child is transitioning. I mean, it's hard to believe that they would interfere with a parent-child relationship like that. So there's so many different things you have to change in the school. The trick is, what are the most impactful things you can do right away to affect the greatest amount of change without really rocking the boat so much that the end users are affected too much and you cause more chaos than help. So I don't have a perfect answer for you yet. And honestly, I think if anybody does at this stage, they're not looking deep enough into the details because it needs change. It has to be changed. It's something that requires a day one plan, which we haven't fully formalized as a team yet, but we're getting more input. And then I think your day one plan needs to go into place so you can make moves as quickly and effectively as you can without causing any harm to the system. You certainly need more parental involvement. Parents have almost been shut out of schools in a lot of cases where they've lost their voice. So you've got to get parents re-engaged in that process so they feel like there's a little more faith and trust in the school and what they're doing with their kids. And keep the well-being of the student out and ahead of everything. And then you do have to focus on test scores to get those going back in the right direction. So I think you can hit 2 or 3 doubles pretty quick. But once you want to get to triples and home runs, it's going to take some hard work and some dedication. And you got to get a lot of buy-in. And you got to get all these disparate groups sort of working in the right direction. Some are going to be easier than others. And then I think you can get things on the right path. But you know what? That might be an 8-year project rather than a 4-year project to get that back where it needs to be.
Let's pivot to, we've all seen the headlines related to Chinese illegal marijuana grows throughout the state. How would you approach this differently than the current governor?
Well, that's pretty easy to do. Actually, I had this in my announcement speech. I think we're the only gubernatorial candidate to come right out with it day one. Obviously spent a lot of time with Steve Robinson, who's the best on this subject, just done incredible work. It is ridiculous to think, growing up in Maine, that this is even a problem. And I think that's one of the issues. I think people don't even believe it yet. Unless you're in tune with what's going on, they're like, that's not happening. It's hard to explain it to my mother. And she's just like, no, that's not a real thing. No, it is a real thing. Here's what they do. Well, why would they do that? That's a crazy idea. Well, once you go through it and you kind of get your hands around it, you're like, this should be stopped immediately. And it could be stopped immediately. There's some sheriffs that are doing a fantastic job. I think you all know as well as I do. But law enforcement doesn't have the support. That's pretty clear. They're walking a line. All these men and women want to do the best job they possibly can. They care about their communities. They're almost not allowed to do it. You've got the legislature raising minimums on drugs. You got judges that won't prosecute certain situations for certain types of drugs, and you've got a revolving door when people get arrested for some pretty serious crimes and they get let back out on the street. So in terms of Chinese marijuana, that's essentially done. The law enforcement is going to have full authority to go after and do what they need to do. And then you have to cooperate with federal authorities. I know they're in the state and they're working on it right now, but it's harder for them when they're not allowed to cooperate in some cases with local authorities. But you do those three things, I think that problem's wrapped up pretty quick. And then you send the message, not in this state. That's not going to happen. And then in relation to cooperation with ICE, LD 1971, we said it yesterday that Governor Mills needs to veto that. That shouldn't happen. Portland shouldn't be a sanctuary city. There shouldn't be a sanctuary city in the state. And if there are, they need to pay for it themselves. You can't have hardworking families all over Maine paying for that. I mean, Portland only has roughly 60,000 people and takes 80% of the general assistance dollars, which is just so lopsided. What about the rest of the state? I'm definitely a law and order guy. It's not about prosecuting every person for every little thing and overfilling prisons. Prisons are overloaded now, but those offenses that are serious, they have to be handled seriously. Law enforcement needs to be supported. They need to have the resources they need to succeed. So one of the challenges you have in Portland is that when the state's giving them so much money, they're just going to continue the policies that aren't working. So one of the things you need to do is you need to pull the funding out of there and get it a little more spread out effectively to the rest of the people in Maine. You can't have 80% of the dollars helping a city of 60,000 people when you've got 1.4 million people in the state. There's a lot more people in the state that need help than just in Portland. So in example, there was a reimbursement rate where Portland was looking at being dropped from 80% down to 40% for certain housing programs. Had that just happened, I guarantee Portland would have changed their policy, and all of a sudden they require less dollars. So the state government, I should say those in charge right now, Democrats, needed to say no at that point. So if a new governor comes in, you've got to buckle up on the purse strings there and force them to change their policies. Otherwise, they're going to have to go back to everyone in Portland and raise their taxes 30, 40%, and that's not going to work. So one way or another, you can change it. Somebody's just got to come in there and put their foot down.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk. We're having a conversation with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate Ben Midgley. How does your business experience influence your approach to be Maine's governor?
Well, I think one of the things that is unique to my experience set is I've started this business that I was CEO of and founding partner from no clubs, one employee, and then built it up over the years to a very complex business in 48 states, 6 countries, $1 billion in sales, like we discussed earlier, created 15,000 jobs, dealt with private equity, dealt with real estate markets, dealt with contractors in many, many different states, many different state governments, hosts and hosts of employment laws in different states. Obviously, running a company of that size through the COVID shutdowns was tremendous. We had to shut down 500 facilities and then open them all up step by step while stopping member billing, keeping customers happy, rolling out additional services so we could maintain revenue in the businesses. Protocols if someone came into the club with COVID, first level exposure, second level exposure, third level exposure for a member or for a team member. A reopening platform. We had to have a 42-page manual that we created on how to reopen safely in 48 different states that all had different laws down to the county and city level. So that was a bit challenging. And one thing I didn't note is that we were the only company in the world, a fitness company, that grew their membership during COVID as well. And that's because we didn't lose any members because they were so happy with the way we managed through that crisis. And as the red states were opening before the blue states, which we all know happened, people were joining in such great numbers that it far outweighed any of the lag in enrollments we were having in the blue states by being held off. So that's a big stat for our industry to not lose any members. So if you look at our membership growth history, it never went down. It just kept going up. Also, when you're building a business the size I have, which no other candidate has built anything close to a business this size, it's very complex. 500 different locations requires significant investment. I think if you total all the investment that's been put in our units, it's probably somewhere in the line of $1 billion+ just in construction and real estate. And the complexities that go along with planning that type of business strategically year over year are significant. You have to have strategy, tactics, timing for all of the different elements that you do in the business. And if you compare that to a state government, Maine has 15 primary departments that you have to work with different commissioners. Obviously, you have the judiciary, the legislature, and you have about 14,000 team members or employees for the state. You've got a lot of vital services that have to be run effectively for the people in the state. You have a lot of complex cooperation between departments, especially if you're talking about emergency preparedness or healthcare situations, education. It takes a lot of work. So you need somebody who's really done that and been there, lived it, and can make all those things work together while keeping your eye on the ball to make sure that Mainers have a much more prosperous future. So I think if everybody out there, I think you've got a lot more experience in what I've done to be situated for a job like that than anybody else. So I'm thinking that's what we can bring to the job that'll make a difference for Mainers.
As you're aware, I'm sure, we have a referendum coming up maybe to change the yellow flag over to red flag. What do you think about our Second Amendment?
In the state of Maine, you can't really argue with the Second Amendment, right? It says right in our Constitution that this right will never be questioned. Second Amendment is not up for negotiation. We talked about that in our announcement. So I'm a big supporter of gun rights, whether you're a hunter or a sportsman, you just want to protect your home or your family. So I'm going to have gun rights owners' interest in mind from day one, and I'll have their backs every single day. It's just something you do in Maine. Maine has one of the highest percentages of gun ownerships and one of the lowest crime rates in the country. So it's not a gun problem in Maine. You have a lot of mental health issues and other things that create those situations, which is a different subject. But overall, by and large, Mainers have been very responsible gun owners. In terms of the red flag law, that's just a bad approach. I think they're trying to sell it that maybe 14 other states have it, but that means 36 states don't have it. And if you've listened to the testimony from law enforcement in our state, they've just provided reason after reason that it is totally improper for our law enforcement officers to be put in that situation, and actually the safety issues it could cause by implementing that law. So I'm completely against that. And now that the yellow flag law is getting used much more effectively, I think it's been used, over 80 times now? It's probably over 100 by now. Law enforcement's using that much more sternly and much more effectively. And once you get that going, that's certainly sufficient and should be the practice.
Maine has seen multiple child deaths under DHHS supervision. As governor, how do you plan on addressing this?
Well, first, anybody who talks about this has to give credit to Bill Diamond and the organization that he's built, because I don't think many people in the state would even be aware of what's happening and to the level that it is happening. As a parent, any parent would just be disgusted with this. When you're talking about kids, it's the worst possible scenario, and the state should do everything they can to take care of children that are under the state's protection. Day one, you've got to pull it out of the Department of Health and Human Services. It's got to have its own functioning budget and its own oversight. There's complex issues that have to be addressed, from the Katahdin platform they use to coordinate information to how they treat foster parents, how schools are allowed to report issues, law enforcement, physicians, the training for the team members, the pay level for folks in the department. So there's a lot of fundamental things that have to be changed, not hard things to change, but they have to be changed. And then I think it's entirely appropriate for the governor, should it be me, to have every child's name under state protection in a binder on their desk so you can personally follow up on them on a regular basis. It's that level that requires that type of involvement. It's something that shouldn't be deferred to just the departments. Our current governor won't address it, won't acknowledge it. It's a shame. I don't understand it, but it would be top priority to make sure those kids are safe.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are speaking with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate, Ben Midgley.
So, Ben, I don't have to tell you there's going to be a big field in the primary for the Republican Party. How are you going to separate yourself?
That's a good question. There's 1.4 million people in the state, right? I think maybe we'll have only 10. So that's the way I look at it. It's really not that bad. In terms of separating from the field, I look at, and I guess you got to call it competition in a few ways. One, I don't view any one of them as competition or anyone to enter as competition for a couple of reasons. One is if the state ends up with a Republican governor of any sort, we're in a better place. So there's really nothing for us to lose in that scenario, as long as somebody doesn't go in and just sort of go off the rails and make some bad decisions. But if any of the folks out there that are also running win, we're going to be in a better place. Two, as I've grown up, I played a lot of sports. My father always taught me to, play your own game. You have your strategy, you execute it, and you make other people react to you. So You got to put a little bit of blinders on from that standpoint, but you lose too much focus if you look at what everybody else is doing rather than focusing on what you're doing. You're going to lose the focus on what's most important, which is the people in the state and the issues. So that's how we're going to approach that. And I'm getting to the point about differentiation. Lastly, I'm not the kind of candidate who will take shots at anybody else. I think that's not becoming of Republicans. Leave that to the Democrats. They're going to have their own challenging primary. I think it's a harder thing to do, to treat each other with respect and dignity. But I think in this political environment that's been developing over the last, 15, 20 years, we've got to lower the temperature a little bit. And it's okay to have discussions and disagreements, sometimes, really strong disagreements, but you can do that in a really balanced way because you're trying to set an example for people. And you're trying to show people that you really, truly do care about them and their best interests rather than some of these folks that are in it. They're in it for personal ambition. They're not so much in it for really doing good. For me, this is probably the last thing I should be doing right now. I've had a very successful career. I've got a wonderful wife and 3 healthy kids. So this is probably the last thing I should do. But when you love the state so much as you do, and everybody does, then there's an obligation, if you think you can make a difference, to stick your neck out there and do it. From the differentiation standpoint, one of the things I did really well, and I think you know me, I try not to toot my own horn too much, but you do have to do that a little bit if you're running for governor, I suppose, is build a culture. Culture drives everything. People ask, how do we get that company so successful over the years? And it was because we just did it differently. Everybody in that business had my personal cell number. If there was something that needed to be talked out, they didn't talk to somebody on the team. Well, they did initially, but then I would get involved and we'd work it out. And we work it out from the standpoint where it works for both of us. Sometimes maybe you'll lose a little bit. Sometimes I'll lose a little bit. But over time, when you have that kind of a relationship, respect develops, trust develops. And when those things happen, the bond it creates and the sustainability it creates is dramatic. And a lot of businesses never get to that point because they don't work hard enough on the fundamental issues that really mean something to people. And that's what helps keep people together and get things going efficiently and effectively. And that's why we essentially blew past much, much bigger competitors that didn't have that. And honestly, and this is just an example from the business world, when people came in to talk about the franchise, the first thing we say is, look, you can lose all your money. This is how this works. If you don't do this, this, and this could be very bad. You want to put your house up as collateral? No chance, because that's your rock. You can't do that. You got to take care of your family first. So you go out and you talk to everybody who's had good experiences, medium experiences. Maybe there's somebody who's had a bad experience. You make sure you have your eyes wide open, and then let's talk again. So it wasn't about making the sale. And too many politicians, they're trying to sell something to people, trying to get people to believe something. And I believe that to be inauthentic. You have to say what you're going to do and then do what you said. And then you gain that credibility and that trust over time. That's what I do best. And everything that we're doing here is about our true care and concern for the people of Maine and getting things going in the right direction. So that's one big differentiator. And then secondarily, just the experience with running a complex organization, keeping the state running efficiently as it should, making sure I's are dotted and T's are crossed, get the drama out of it, and let's just get in there and do the work. The real goal is we can make the future better for all Mainers and continue to have it get better. You just have to do the work.
As governor, what will be your top 3 priorities?
There's about 17 issues that we really need to address in the state. But if you bring it down to the top 3 that you have to get on immediately is obviously improving the economy in the state, lowering the cost of living, and then increasing opportunity. And that's both for the individual and businesses. You can't have Maine being one of the top tax states in the country with one of the lowest incomes. It's just a terrible place to be. You can't be 43rd in business and 50th in infrastructure. You've got to get these things ticked off pretty quickly, and then you're going to start letting a little steam out of the system, giving folks a chance to catch their breath and get their feet underneath them, and then take a look forward that, hey, you know what? Maybe this is going to be different. Maybe we are going to have a little better chance here. And then people start to believe it. And then you get more businesses come in. People get a little more money in their paycheck. They get a little more money in their savings account. They can go out and buy an extra gift for their kid at Christmas time. And maybe they can go out and take a nice trip with the family. But then attitudes change, perspectives change, people's outlook brightens, and you'll be amazed what a few quick wins can do to get a state going in the right direction.
You've been listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk. We're having a conversation with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate, Ben Midgley. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Sure. Starting with myself, I grew up in the state. I grew up in Kennebunk, Maine. I went to school in Kennebunk, graduated from there. My wife, Sonia, is from Lyman, Maine, and she went to Massabesic. We got married. Our kids grew up here. Our kids all went to the same high school I did. My mom lives in town, which is great because there were some years that my mom was living in Virginia, and that was kind of tough. But she's home now. She's 84. I have to say it. My mom's a Democrat, and it was really tough for her to get her hands around that I'm a Republican and running as a Republican, but I am happy to say my mom is going to switch over and vote for me. So that was really good news. That was hard for her. It took a lot of talking, but then she realized, look, there's a little bit more rational thought on the Republican side than I thought there was. My aunt, I got to work on her a little bit, but I think she's going to come around. And my father, I think I mentioned this earlier, he spent most of his time in West Kennebunk, Maine, and just spent his whole life taking care of veterans. He passed away May of last year. And then we're very close with the folks at the Sanford Springville American Legion, Sanford. They're just some of the best. I get choked up just mentioning it. They're just some of the best people I've ever met. And they just, fulfilled my father's life to the point that I could never thank him enough. So we try to support them as best as possible. And the work they do for veterans is amazing because, Maine's one of the highest percentages of veteran population, if not the highest in the country. So we got to really take care of our vets. It's just been the most wonderful thing to be in here. I did live in California for a little bit, went out of town, have a job there. But when we had kids, the first thing we did was move home. And we've been back in Kennebunk for, I think, 19 years now. I can't imagine our kids growing up anywhere else. And the kids appreciate it. And if you go to a city or if you go somewhere else and they see what else is going on in the world, which you want to expose kids to, right? They want to see it. Man, do they appreciate coming home and just getting under a tree or getting down to a pond or, whatever it is, get down to the ocean and take a walk. I mean, it's unbelievable how much their appreciation for the state grows. And I know that's appreciation shared by everybody. I don't have to speak too much about it, but I can't imagine living anywhere else. I can't imagine our kids growing up anywhere else. I hope as they grow up, they end up very close to home. Some parents tell me that's a tricky one to pull off, but we're doing everything we can to see if we can make it work. Before we let you go, if this was a pitch to the voters of Maine, what would you like them to know? I would say that this campaign is not about me. It's never going to be about me. It's about us. It's about every family struggling to get ahead in the state. It's about every small business trying to survive. And it's about every Maine parent who just wants their kid to grow up in the same state that we did, which was wonderful. And I did use that in my launch announcement because when you really sit down and you think about what this means, it's only about taking care of people in the state. I always think long term. So the things we have to do are going to require some systemic change in the state. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take somebody who's not going to give up, somebody who's going to look around corners, try and see the problems, but be 100% committed to the people of the state. No special interests, no political connections. That's why I love being from outside in politics. I think I mentioned earlier, personally, this is probably the last thing I should be doing right now, but the state needs help right now. Too many Mainers are at their breaking point, and you can't allow that to happen. So I think we can fix this. I think we have the best opportunity we've had in years to get into office. So if we can keep people energized, bring some independents in, maybe a few Democrats, because I know Democrats are tired too, I think we can win this and get things going in the right direction.
So if somebody wants to get involved in your campaign, what's the best way for them to get involved?
Best way to do that, and we would appreciate all the help that people want to bring, is go to benforgovernor.com. People can sign up to volunteer, and we appreciate that significantly. If you'd like to donate and help the cause, that would be fantastic. We're going to need everyone's support. And then I promise you, we'll go out and we'll make you proud.
Well, thank you so much for taking the trip and coming up here to see us. We do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you. You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or in your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news
from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.